Clara Whitfield adjusted her worn leather medical bag one last time, checking the precious supplies within: bandages, laudanum, carbolic acid, and the few surgical instruments she could afford. The train platform in Topeka, Kansas, bustled with travelers. But she stood alone, her navy traveling dress already collecting the fine dust that seemed to coat everything in this frontier town. At 28, she had already seen more suffering than most, first during the war years as a young nurse's aide, then in the crowded tenements of St. Louis. Now, she sought something different in the vast expanse of the West. Nevada Territory, she murmured, reading her contract again. The mining camps along the Silver Veins needed medical care desperately. The pay was modest, but it included transportation and lodging at various stations. More importantly, it offered escape from the memories that haunted her back east, memories of patients she couldn't save, of a fiancé who never returned from Shiloh. The stagecoach that would carry her west sat waiting, its red paint faded and chipped, testament to countless journeys across hostile terrain. The driver, a grizzled man named Samuel Hutchins, helped her with her trunk. "You sure about this, miss?" he asked, tobacco juice staining his gray beard. "Ain't many women heading out to them mining camps alone. It's rough country." Clara lifted her chin. "I'm a nurse, Mr. Hutchins. Rough country needs healing hands." He shrugged, securing her belonging. 3 other passengers would share the journey: a nervous merchant named Theodore Blackwood, heading to Carson City with bolts of fabric, a silent man in a black coat who gave his name only as Mr. Cord, and Martha Flynn, a widow planning to join her brother at a claim near Virginia City. As the coach lurched forward, Clara watched Kansas fade into memory. The landscape gradually transformed from rolling prairie to increasingly barren terrain. Red rock formations rose like ancient sentinels against a sky that shifted from blue to purple as afternoon wore on. The coach stopped at way stations, rough establishments offering barely edible food and dubious water. Clara treated a station keeper's infected wound at one stop, earning grateful looks and fresh bread for the journey. By the 4th day, they had entered true desert country. The heat was oppressive, broken only by cold nights that left frost on the coach windows. Sagebrush and scattered juniper dotted the landscape, while distant mountain ranges shimmered in the heat. Clara had never seen such emptiness, such terrible beauty. The howl of coyotes at night sent shivers down her spine, a wild music that spoke of ancient freedoms and dangers. Almost through Skeleton Pass, Samuel called down as they entered a narrow canyon. The walls rose steeply on either side, red sandstone carved by wind and time into fantastic shapes. "Another hour to Juniper Station." Clara was admiring the play of late afternoon light on the rock walls when the first shot rang out. The sound echoed off the canyon walls, followed immediately by Samuel's curse and the scream of horses. The coach lurched violently, throwing Clara against Martha. Through the window, she glimpsed masked riders emerging from behind boulders, their rifles trained on the coach. "Nobody move," a rough voice commanded. "Throw down your weapons and valuables." Mr. Cord reached for something inside his coat, but a bullet through the coach roof changed his mind. Theodore whimpered, fumbling with his money pouch. Martha clutched Clara's hand, her face pale as parchment. The door was yanked open. A man with cold blue eyes above a dirty bandana gestured with his pistol. "Out, all of you." They stumbled into the fading daylight. Clara counted 6 bandits, all armed, their horses stamping nervously. Samuel lay slumped on the driver's box, blood seeping from his shoulder. Her nurse's instincts flared. "Let me help him," she said, starting forward. The leader, a thin man with scarred hands, backhanded her casually, sending her sprawling in the dust. "You'll help nobody. Woman, Jake, check their belongings." They ransacked the coach methodically, taking money, watches, and Theodore's fabric. When they found Clara's medical supplies, the leader paused. Well, a lady doctor?" His laugh was ugly. "Might come in handy. Boys, maybe we should—" "Please," Clara interrupted, struggling to her knees. I'm just a nurse, traveling to help miners. Take what you want, but leave the medical supplies. People need—" The rifle butt caught her temple with crushing force. Pain exploded through her skull as she fell, dimly aware of Martha screaming, of more gunshots, of voices growing distant. Darkness crept in from the edges of her vision. "Leave her," she heard someone say. "Dead weight. The buzzards will handle it." Hoofbeats faded. Silence descended, broken only by the moan of wind through the canyon. Clara tried to move, to speak, but her body wouldn't respond. Warm wetness, blood, trickled down her face. The last thing she saw was the purple sky darkening to black, the first stars emerging like distant fires. She woke to complete darkness and crushing pain. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then it rushed back. The robbery, the blow, being left for dead. Her nurse's training kicked in, assessing damage even as panic threatened. Head wound, definitely, possible concussion. But she was alive, slowly, fighting nausea. Clara pushed herself up. The coach was gone. So were the others. Dark stains on the ground might have been blood, but she couldn't see clearly. The canyon walls loomed like prison bars against a star-filled sky. Temperature had plummeted. She shivered in her torn dress. "Help!" she whispered. Then louder. "Help!" Her voice echoed mockingly back. No water, no food, no shelter. Miles from anywhere. In a canyon that might not see traffic for days. The wound on her temple throbbed with each heartbeat. When she touched it, her fingers came away sticky. A coyote howled somewhere in the darkness, answered by others. Closer than before. Clara knew what happened to wounded animals in the desert. She struggled to her feet, swaying, using the canyon wall for support. Which direction? In the darkness, with her head spinning. She couldn't tell. "Our Father, who art in heaven," she began. The familiar prayer, a comfort against the terror clawing at her throat. Her nurse's bag, had they taken it? No, there, a darker shape against the ground. She fumbled for it, finding it ransacked but not empty. A roll of bandage remained, a small bottle of carbolic acid. She did what she could for her head wound, working by touch. Move! She had to move. Staying here meant death from exposure, thirst, or predators. Clara chose a direction and began walking, one hand on the canyon wall for guidance. Each step sent pain lancing through her skull. The cold bit through her dress, but she forced herself forward. Time lost meaning. Step, breathe. Step, pray. The canyon seemed endless, a maze of rock and shadow. Her throat burned with thirst. Twice she fell, skinning her palms on sharp stones. The second time, she lay there, tempting to simply give up. So easy to close her eyes, to let the cold take her. But something deeper than fear drove her back to her feet, the same stubborn will that had carried her through the war, through loss and grief. She had come west to heal, to matter. She would not die in this nameless canyon, food for scavengers. Not when there was still breath in her body, still strength in her legs. The stars wheeled overhead, cold and distant. Somewhere in the darkness, a wolf howled. Or was it the wind? Clara stumbled on. Her world narrowed to the next step, the next breath, the next heartbeat. Blood had dried on her face, pulling the skin tight. Her lips cracked in the dry air. The heat of survival, she whispered deliriously, remembering something an old doctor had told her during the war. When everything else fails, the body's heat, the soul's fire, that's what keeps us alive. But she felt no heat now, only cold that seemed to reach into her very bones. Still she walked, because walking meant living, and living meant hope, however faint. Somewhere beyond this canyon lay help. Somewhere. Dawn would come. She just had to survive until then. The desert waited, patient and pitiless. As Clara Whitfield stumbled through the darkness, a broken prayer on her lips and the stubborn spark of life refusing to be extinguished. Elias Hawthorne crouched beside the tracks, studying the chaos of hoofprints in the dawn light. 6 riders, maybe 7. Their horses shod in the style common to rustlers and road agents. The disturbed earth told its story. A coach had stopped here suddenly, wheels digging deep furrows as the driver tried to turn. His weathered fingers traced the marks. Violence had visited this canyon. At 32, Elias had spent half his life reading sign across the territories. The army had taught him during the Apache campaigns, but he'd perfected the skill in the decades since, hiring out to ranchers hunting stolen cattle, to families seeking lost kin, to anyone who needed to find what the desert had hidden. He worked alone now, had done so for 8 years. Ever since, he pushed the memory aside, focusing on the present puzzle. Blood here, dried rust brown on the rocks. Spent cartridges glinting in the early light. His gray eyes, sharp as a hawk's, missed nothing. The outlaws had headed northwest, probably to their hideout in the maze of canyons near Bone Creek. But something else caught his attention, a torn piece of fabric, white with a dark blue edge, caught on a thorny bush. Clean fabric, quality weave, a woman's dress. Or perhaps he picked it up carefully. No, not a dress. The material was sturdy cotton, practical, like a nurse's apron. Blood stained one corner. Elias frowned, scanning the ground more carefully. There, a medical bag, contents scattered, bandages unwound in the dirt, bottles broken, but some items remained. Why leave medical supplies? Outlaws usually took everything valuable. A separate set of tracks caught his eye. Smaller boots, a woman's stride, weaving unsteadily away from the ambush site. She'd stumbled, along the canyon wall. Using it for support, blood drops marked her path like a sinister breadcrumb trail. Recently, too, within the last day, Elias stood. Decision made. His contract to track stolen horses for the Garrison Ranch could wait. This woman, whoever she was, might still be alive. The desert didn't forgive the unprepared and injured. He'd seen what happened to those left behind. He whistled low, and his horse, a steady Mustang named Sage, trotted over. Elias had found the horse wild 3 years back. Patient training creating a partnership built on mutual respect. Now Sage could read his moods, anticipate his needs. A man's life often depended on his horse in this country. Following the blood trail, Elias noted how she'd kept to the canyon wall, smart thinking in the darkness. But her path wavered increasingly, the steps shorter, more erratic. She'd fallen here, palm prints in the dust, blood from scraped hands. Got up again, though, stubborn or desperate, maybe both. The canyon opened into a wider valley. Silver-gray sagebrush dotting the landscape between towers of red rock that rose like giants' teeth against the cloudless sky. An eagle circled overhead, riding the thermals. The woman's trail continued, fainter now but still readable to his trained eye. She'd made it farther than he expected. By mid-morning, the sun beat down mercilessly. Elias stopped to water Sage from his canteen, eyes constantly scanning. The trail led toward a cluster of rocks offering shade. If she had any sense left, she'd have sought shelter there when the sun rose. He found her behind the largest boulder, curled in a small depression where wind had carved a shallow cave. At first, he thought she was dead, so still, face pale beneath dried blood. Her dress was torn, dust-covered, feet bleeding through torn stockings. Dark hair had come loose from its pins, spreading around her like a dark halo. Elias dismounted quietly, approaching as he would a wounded animal. Up close, he could see her chest rising and falling shallowly. Alive. Then, carefully, he knelt beside her, fingers finding the pulse at her neck. Weak but steady. The head wound looked bad. Blood matted in her hair, but it had stopped bleeding. She's alive, he murmured to himself, a habit born of solitary years. Her eyes fluttered open at his voice, brown eyes, hazed with pain and confusion but alert. She tried to scramble away, a sound of fear escaping her cracked lips. "Easy," Elias said, hands up, making no sudden moves. "I'm not here to hurt you. Name's Elias Hawthorne. I tracked you from the canyon." She stared at him, processing. Her voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. "Water." He unstoppered his canteen, supporting her head as she drank. Not too much. He'd seen men sick from drinking too fast after deprivation. She had discipline, though, stopping herself after a few sips. "Clara," she managed. Clara Whitfield. I'm a nurse. That explained the medical bag. Elias studied her face, noting intelligence behind the pain. You were on the stage that got hit? She nodded, wincing. They left me for dead. Nearly were. He began examining her injuries with surprising gentleness for such calloused hands. Need to clean that head wound. Got any supplies in that bag of yours? Some. They took most of it. Elias retrieved what remained from his saddlebags where he'd collected it. Together with his own basic medical kit, every tracker learned field medicine or didn't last long. They had enough. He worked efficiently, Clara directing him despite her weakness. The carbolic acid made her gasp, but she didn't cry out. You've done this before, she observed as he wrapped her head with practiced movements. Had to learn, no doctors in most places I go. He didn't mention that he'd learned trying to save his wife, or that all his skill hadn't been enough then. The sun climbed higher, shade shrinking. Elias made a decision. Can't stay here. There's a spring about 5 miles east, a place I use sometimes. Can you ride? Clara tried to stand, swaying dangerously. I can manage. She couldn't. That was clear. Elias considered options. Sage was strong enough to carry 2, but 5 miles. He fashioned a rough travois from branches and his bedroll, ignoring Clara's protests about inconvenience. The heat of survival will keep you alive tonight, he said, settling her as comfortably as possible. But only if we reach water and shelter. The journey took most of the day. Elias walked, leading Sage carefully over the rough terrain. Every jolt made Clara bite her lip, but she stayed conscious, even pointing out a rattlesnake he'd almost missed in his concern for navigating. The spring sat in a hidden grotto, fed by underground sources, creating a small oasis of green in the gray-brown landscape. Cottonwoods provided shade, their leaves whispering secrets to the wind. Elias had camped here many times, drawn by the reliable water and natural shelter of the overhanging rocks. He settled Clara on his bedroll in the shade, refilling canteens and setting up a proper camp. She watched him work, noting his economy of movement, how his hands never stilled. Thank you, she said as he handed her more water, this time mixed with a little whiskey from his supplies. I would have died out there. Elias nodded, uncomfortable with gratitude. He built a small fire as evening approached, the temperature already dropping. In the desert, you could burn in the day and freeze at night. He'd seen men survive wounds only to die of exposure. Tell me about the robbery, he said, settling across from her. Information helped track outlaws, and talking would keep her awake. Clara described the attack, the leader with scarred hands, the casual violence. Her voice remained steady, clinical, as if describing someone else's experience. Elias recognized the detachment. He'd used it himself. Sounds like Tom Garrett's bunch, he said. They've been hitting stages along this route for months. You're lucky. They don't usually leave witnesses. Lucky. She touched her bandaged head with a bitter smile. I suppose I am. Night fell quickly, stars emerging in impossible numbers. The fire crackled between them, pushing back the darkness. Coyotes called in the distance, their songs echoing off the rocks. Clara shivered despite the fire's warmth. Elias added more wood, then surprised himself by draping his coat over her shoulders. He wasn't given to gestures of kindness anymore, had trained himself to stay distant. But something about this woman, her courage, perhaps, or the way she'd thanked him with such simple dignity, slipped past his guards. How do you stand it? Clara asked suddenly. The loneliness, the danger. He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, better alone than losing what matters. Desert's honest. It'll kill you clean. No pretense. People are harder to read. You lost someone. Not a question. My wife, my daughter, 8 years back. Fever took them while I was gone tracking rustlers. The words came out flat. Practiced. Built them a house in Colorado. Thought they'd be safe. Came back to 2 graves and neighbors who said they'd done what they could. Clara reached out instinctively, her hand covering his where it rested on his knee. I'm sorry. He looked at her hand, small and pale against his sun-darkened skin, then gently withdrew. "Long time ago. What about you? What sends a nurse into this wilderness?" She told him about the war, the hospitals that were more charnel houses than places of healing, about trying to build a life after, only to find the memories following her, about deciding the frontier needed healing hands more than city hospitals needed another nurse haunted by ghosts. They talked as the fire burned low, two damaged people finding unexpected comfort in shared honesty. When Clara finally dozed, Elias kept watch, rifle across his knees. The desert held many dangers, and Garrett's gang might circle back. But for now, in this small circle of firelight, there was peace. The woman slept, no longer alone in the vast darkness, and Elias, for the first time in years, didn't mind the company. He'd forgotten how voices could fill the empty spaces, how another's presence could make the night less cold. "The heat of survival," he murmured, remembering her delirious words from the trail. Yes, there was heat in survival, in fire, in shelter, in the stubborn refusal to surrender, and perhaps, though he wasn't ready to admit it, in the unexpected connections forged between two souls the desert had brought together. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and indifferent, as Elias Hawthorne kept his vigil, guarding the woman he'd found left for dead but very much alive. Morning arrived with a blaze of orange and gold, painting the red rocks in shades of fire. Clara woke to the smell of coffee and the sight of Elias crouched beside a barrel cactus, carefully cutting into its flesh with his knife. She watched, fascinated, as he extracted clear liquid into a cup. "Desert's got everything you need if you know where to look," he said without turning, somehow aware she was awake. "This here's clean water, better than some wells I've drunk from." He brought her the cup, along with coffee brewed strong enough to wake the dead. Clara sipped gratefully, her head still throbbing but clearer than yesterday. The morning sun already carried heat, but the cottonwoods provided blessed shade. "Can you show me?" she asked. "About the cactus. I mean, if I'm to survive out here, I should learn." Elias studied her, seeing determination behind the bruises and exhaustion. Most Eastern women would be demanding immediate return to civilization. This one wanted to learn survival. "Your head up to it?" "I've worked through worse pain. Besides," she managed a slight smile, "sitting still never healed anyone." He helped her to her feet, steadying her when she swayed. Together, they walked slowly around the spring's perimeter, Elias pointing out the desert's hidden resources, the barrel cactus for water, but only certain kinds. Others would poison you. Prickly pear pads could be eaten once you burned off the spines. That plant there, Mormon tea, helped with breathing troubles. "See these tracks?" He knelt by a muddy patch near the spring. "Coyote. Came to drink early morning. Probably watching us now from those rocks. These here." He pointed to different marks. "Deer. And this. Let me guess." Clara knelt carefully beside him, squinting at the impressions. "Something large. The toes are spread wide. Good eye. Mountain lion. But old tracks. 2 days at least. Still, worth knowing he uses this spring." They spent the morning this way, Elias teaching, Clara absorbing everything with the focused intensity she'd once applied to medical texts. When a red-tailed hawk circled overhead, he showed her how to read its hunting patterns. When they found a shed snakeskin, he explained how to identify venomous species by their scales. By midday, the heat had become oppressive. They retreated to the deepest shade, where Elias had improved their camp. Clara noticed how efficiently he'd arranged everything, supplies protected from animals, clear sight lines in all directions, escape routes planned. "You're always ready to run or fight," she observed. "Staying alive out here means staying ready." He handed her strips of dried meat from his pack. "Jerky's not much, but it'll keep strength up." As they ate, Clara found herself studying him. Elias Hawthorne was lean as a wolf, skin bronzed by years of sun, dark hair touched with early gray at the temples. His face carried lines earned by squinting into distance and weather, but his eyes, gray as storm clouds, held depths of old pain carefully walled away. His hands, she noticed, were gentle despite their calluses, the hands of a man who knew his own strength and controlled it. "Tell me about your work," she said. "How does a man become a tracker?" Elias leaned back against a boulder, considering. Didn't plan it. Joined the army, young, foolish kid looking for adventure. Got assigned to the scouts during the Apache troubles. Had a sergeant, Irish fellow named O'Brien, who'd learned from the Indians themselves. He taught me to see what others missed. And after the army, tried settling. Built that house I mentioned. Took up ranching. His voice roughened slightly. After Mary and little Sarah died, couldn't stay. Sold the land. Started drifting. Found I could make a living finding what others lost. Cattle, horses, people sometimes. Been doing it since. Clara heard the carefully controlled pain, recognized it from her own struggles with memory. Do you ever track happy endings? Lost children reunited with families? Sometimes. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Found a boy once, wandered off from a wagon train. 3 days in the desert, but he'd remembered what his PA taught him, stayed put, found shade, rationed his water. Tough little fellow. His mother's face when I brought him back. He shrugged. Makes the dark times worthwhile. That's why I became a nurse. Clara said softly, to balance the scales, for every life lost. Try to save another. For every hurt. Bring healing. She gestured at the vast landscape around them. I thought the frontier needed that more than anywhere. It does, but it's hard country for healers. Desert doesn't much care about good intentions. No, but the people might. Clara straightened, wincing as the movement pulled at her injuries. These mining camps, the isolated ranches, they need medical care desperately. I've seen what happens when wounds fester. When fever runs unchecked, simple knowledge could save so many. Elias watched her animated face, the passion lighting her brown eyes despite pain and exhaustion. When was the last time he'd felt such purpose? You really mean to continue, after what happened? Especially after what happened. Those outlaws, they're a sickness on this land. But I won't let them stop me from bringing healing where it's needed. A comfortable silence fell between them. The spring gurgled softly, cottonwood leaves rustling in a hot breeze. Elias found himself surprisingly at ease. Usually, company chafed at him, made him restless for solitude. But Clara's presence felt natural, undemanding. I should check your bandages, she said eventually. Head wounds can be tricky. He helped her to the medical supplies, watching as she examined her own injuries with professional detachment. Her hands were steady despite everything, movements precise. She'd make a good frontier woman, he thought, if she survived long enough to learn all the desert's lessons. It's healing clean, she announced, though I'll have an interesting scar. At least my hair will cover it. She paused, vulnerability flickering across her features. If I still look presentable? Scars are honest, Elias said gruffly. Show you've lived, survived. Better than pretty faces that have never known hardship. Clara looked at him, something shifting in her expression. Thank you for that and everything. He busied himself with the fire, uncomfortable with the warmth in her voice. We'll stay here another day, let you get strength back. Then I'll take you to Millerton. Railroad stops there. You can head back east, or to Carson City if you're still determined. I'm not going back east. The firmness in her voice made him look up. I came here to do work that matters. One setback, even a violent one, doesn't change that need. Stubborn woman. Practical woman. I've already survived the worst they could do. Now I know what to watch for. As afternoon shadows lengthened, Elias showed her how to read the sky for weather changes. Those clouds building over the western peaks meant possible storms. The way the animals moved, ants traveling in lines, birds flying low, suggested atmospheric pressure dropping. Rain in the desert's both blessing and curse, he explained. Flash floods can kill faster than thirst, but knowing where water collects after storms can save your life. They made simple preparations, Elias digging drainage channels around their shelter, securing supplies. Clara helped despite his protests, claiming movement eased her stiffness. When evening came, bringing its swift temperature drop. They sat by the fire again. This time, Clara had questions about the people of the frontier, the miners, ranchers, drifters, and dreamers who populated this harsh land. Elias told her about boomtowns that appeared overnight and vanished just as quickly, about men who struck silver and lost it all at cards, about women who ran boarding houses and saloons, tough as any man and twice as smart, about Indian tribes pushed from their lands, trying to preserve their ways, about Chinese workers building railroads for pennies, facing hatred while creating miracles of engineering. It's a hard land that makes hard people, he concluded, but also honest ones. Mostly. Pretense doesn't last out here. And which are you? Clara asked. Hard or honest? Both, I reckon. Man has to be, to last. She was quiet a moment, firelight playing across her thoughtful face. I don't think you're as hard as you pretend. A truly hard man wouldn't have followed my trail, wouldn't have spent his day teaching me survival. Elias shifted uncomfortably. Just practical. Couldn't leave you to die. Others would have. Others did. She pulled his coat closer around her shoulders. He'd insisted she keep it as night fell. I think there's more kindness left in you than you want to admit. He stood abruptly. I'll check the perimeter. But his usual sharp tone was missing, and Clara saw something almost vulnerable flash across his weathered features before he turned away. She watched him disappear into the darkness, moving silent as a shadow. This strange, lonely man who'd saved her life, who taught with patience despite claiming to prefer solitude, who spoke of his dead family only once but carried their loss in every careful distance he maintained. When he returned, they prepared for sleep. Clara on the bedroll, Elias wrapped in a blanket nearby, rifle close at hand. The stars emerged in their millions, the Milky Way, a river of light across the darkness. Elias? Clara's voice was soft in the quiet. What are you really tracking out here, besides rustlers and lost things? He was silent so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, barely audible, maybe a reason to stop running. Haven't found it yet. Clara closed her eyes, understanding flooding through her. They were both refugees in their own ways, she from memories of death and failure, he from the ghosts of love lost. The desert had drawn them with its promise of, what, redemption, forgetting, or perhaps just the simple honesty of survival, where each day was earned through skill and will. Maybe we find reasons when we stop looking so hard, she murmured. If Elias heard her, he gave no sign, but later, when Clara woke briefly in the deep of night, she saw him sitting watch, silhouetted against the stars, and for just a moment, she thought his gaze wasn't on the darkness beyond their camp, but on her. The spring gurgled its ancient song. The desert breathed around them, vast and patient, and in their small circle of warmth and light, two wounded souls found brief refuge, building something as fragile and precious as water in this dry land. Trust. The storm Elias had predicted arrived 3 days into their journey toward Millerton. They had been making steady progress across the high desert plateau, Clara growing stronger each day. When the western horizon turned an ominous yellow-brown, the air grew thick, oppressive, carrying the metallic taste of approaching catastrophe. Sandstorm, Elias said tersely, already scanning for shelter. Big one. We need cover now. Clara had read about such storms but never imagined their terrible majesty. The wall of sand advanced like a living thing, towering hundreds of feet high, swallowing the landscape in its churning mass. Lightning flickered within it, dry lightning that could spark brush fires even as the sand smothered everything. Elias spotted a cluster of rocks forming a shallow cave, barely large enough for 2 people and a horse. He drove Sage toward it as the first winds hit, nearly knocking Clara from her perch behind the saddle. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in seconds. Inside, he had to shout over the rising howl. They tumbled into the shelter just as the storm engulfed them. The world disappeared. Sand and dust created an impenetrable curtain, driven by winds that screamed like demons, even in their shelter. Grit found every gap, coating them in fine powder. Clara pressed against the back wall, bandana over her face, but still the dust invaded her lungs. Elias pulled her against him, wrapping his duster around them both, creating a small pocket of cleaner air. She stiffened initially, propriety ingrained even in crisis, but survival overruled convention. She pressed her face against his chest, feeling his steady heartbeat through the cloth. His arms encircled her, one hand cradling her head protectively. "Breathe shallow," he murmured against her ear. "Through the cloth. It'll pass." The storm raged for hours. Thunder crashed overhead, though no rain fell. At one point, Sage whinnied in distress, and Elias had to hold the horse's head, speaking low reassurances. Clara helped, stroking the animal's neck, understanding the terror of being trapped by forces beyond control. Time became meaningless in the howling darkness. Clara found herself focusing on immediate sensations: Elias's warmth, the rhythm of his breathing, the way his hands stayed gentle despite the violence surrounding them. She'd been held by a man before, her long-dead fiancé, but that had been soft romance in peaceful gardens. This was something elemental, two humans sheltering together against nature's fury, propriety stripped away by necessity. When the storm finally began to ease, they emerged into a transformed world. The landscape had been resculpted, familiar landmarks erased or altered. Drifts of sand created new dunes where none had existed. The air still hung thick with dust, the sun a pale ghost behind the haze. "Well," Clara said, trying to shake sand from her hair. "That was educational." Elias actually chuckled, a rusty sound, as if he'd forgotten how. "You've got sand in places you won't find for weeks." They made camp early, both exhausted from the storm's battering. As Clara prepared a simple meal from their supplies, she noticed Elias favoring his left shoulder. "You're hurt," she said. It wasn't a question. "Old injury. Storm must have aggravated it." He tried to wave her off, but she was already moving with professional purpose. "Shirt off," she commanded. "I'm still a nurse, even covered in dust." He complied reluctantly, revealing a torso marked by years of hard living, scars from knife and bullet, sun-darkened skin over lean muscle. The shoulder showed an old bullet wound, the scarring extensive. "Apache?" Clara asked, gently probing the area. "Comanchero, 8 years back." He tensed under her touch but didn't pull away. She worked in silence, using what remained of her medical supplies to create a poultice from desert plants he'd shown her. Her hands were clinical but gentle, and Elias found himself relaxing despite his usual wariness of being touched. "There," she said finally. "That should ease the inflammation. You'll need to rest it. Can't rest on the trail. Then you'll heal slowly and poorly." She met his stubborn gaze with her own. "I may owe you my life, but that doesn't mean I'll watch you damage yourself through foolish pride." They stared at each other, wills clashing. Then Elias looked away first, something almost like amusement in his eyes. "You're a bossy woman, Clara Whitfield, and you're a difficult patient, Elias Hawthorne." That night, as they sat by their small fire, the desert seemed to press closer. The storm had scoured away their tracks, making them invisible to any pursuit, but it also emphasized their isolation. They might have been the only two people in the world. "Tell me about your fiancé," Elias said suddenly. "The one who didn't come back from the war." Clara was quiet, watching the flames. "Jonathan, we were young, full of dreams. He was going to be a doctor. I'd be a nurse. We'd work together healing the world." She smiled sadly. "The war needed doctors desperately, so he went. Shiloh took him on the second day. I didn't even get his body back. Just a letter from his commanding officer saying he died bravely. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. Like your Mary and Sarah." She looked at him across the fire. "Do you think we ever really heal from such losses, or do we just learn to carry the scars? Maybe carrying them is a kind of healing. Means we haven't forgotten, haven't let them disappear entirely." He poked at the fire with a stick. "Mary used to say I thought too much, needed to just feel things instead of analyzing them. Never did learn that lesson. Perhaps thinking protects us from feeling too much. This is the heat of survival, fire, and us." Elias said quietly, echoing words she barely remembered speaking in her delirium. You talked about heat when I found you, the heat that keeps us alive. Clara felt warmth bloom in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the fire. I must have been delirious. Maybe, or maybe you understood something true. We survive through heat, actual fire, yes, but also, he hesitated, unused to expressing such thoughts. The warmth between people, even when we try to avoid it. The fire crackled between them. Above, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns. Clara pulled the blanket tighter, not entirely from cold. She was acutely aware of Elias across from her, his quiet strength, the way firelight played across his weathered features. How his eyes held depth she was only beginning to glimpse. I should check your shoulder again before we sleep, she said, needing to break the tension. This time, he submitted without protest. As her hands worked, she felt him watching her, not with the casual interest of a patient, but something deeper, more considering. What? She asked softly. You're not what I expected. When I found you in those rocks, thought you'd be another Eastern woman broken by the frontier, demanding to go home, falling apart. He caught her hand, stilling its movement. But you're different, stronger. Clara looked at their joined hands, his so dark and calloused, hers pale but no longer soft, bearing new calluses from their journey. The frontier doesn't break us. It reveals what was always there. He released her hand slowly, as if reluctant to break the connection. That's either very wise or very foolish. Perhaps both, like continuing to a mining camp after being left for dead. That's definitely foolish. But his tone held admiration rather than criticism. They settled for sleep, maintaining proper distance but somehow more aware of each other than before. Clara lay listening to the desert's night sounds, the distant yip of coyotes, the whisper of wind through rocks, Elias's quiet breathing. She thought about Jonathan, realized with surprise that for the first time in years, remembering him didn't bring sharp pain, just gentle sadness for young dreams lost. Elias? She whispered. Are you going to continue tracking Garrett's gang? It's what I was hired to do, track stolen horses, bring back what I can. And the men themselves? That's the law's job. I just find things. But she heard something in his voice, a hardness that suggested personal stakes beyond professional duty. They've hurt you before, not just this robbery. Long silence. Then, they killed a family 2 months back, settlers heading for California. Found what was left. His voice roughened. The youngest girl looked like Sarah might have. Same age she'd be now. Clara's heart clenched. She understood now. He wasn't just tracking stolen property. He was hunting ghosts, seeking justice for crimes that echoed his own losses. I want to help, she said firmly. When you go after them, absolutely not. It's dangerous enough. I'm already involved. They left me for dead. Remember? She sat up, facing him in the darkness. I can identify them, and someone will need medical skills when the shooting stops. Clara, you saved my life. Let me help you save others. He was quiet so long she wondered if he'd simply decided to ignore her. Then, grudgingly, we'll see. Get healthy first, then talk about foolish crusades. She lay back down, satisfied with this small victory. The desert wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and distant rain somewhere out there. Garrett's gang continued their predations, but here, in this small circle of warmth and growing trust, something else was building. Not love, not yet, but connection, understanding, the recognition of kindred spirits who'd found each other in the vast wilderness. The heat of survival, Clara murmured again, already half asleep, beside her, keeping watch despite exhaustion. Elias allowed himself a rare smile. Yes, there was heat in survival, and against all his careful defenses, he was beginning to feel its warmth. Millerton sprawled before them like a scar on the desert floor, unpainted buildings bleached by sun, dusty streets rutted by wagon wheels, and the constant noise of a frontier town clawing its way toward respectability. The arrival of a dust-covered tracker and an injured woman on a single horse drew immediate attention. Clara felt the weight of dozens of eyes as they rode down Main Street. Women peered from behind curtains, their expressions ranging from curiosity to disapproval. Men lounging outside the saloon straightened, hands drifting toward weapons until they recognized Elias. Even then, their gazes lingered on Clara with speculation that made her skin crawl. "There's a boarding house on 3rd Street," Elias said quietly. Mrs. Patterson runs it clean, doesn't ask questions." But before they could reach it, a woman emerged from the general store, her starched collar and severe expression marking her as one of the town's self-appointed moral guardians. Clara recognized the type. She'd faced them in eastern cities, women who wielded propriety like a weapon. "Well," the woman said, her voice carrying deliberately, "what decent woman travels alone with a man and looking like that?" Clara felt Elias tense beside her. She placed a calming hand on his arm before responding. "A woman who was robbed, injured, and left for dead. Ma'am, Mr. Hawthorne saved my life." "So you say." The woman's eyes narrowed. "Convenient story. We know what kind of women follow men like him around." A crowd was gathering, drawn by the promise of scandal. Clara straightened despite her exhaustion, drawing on reserves of dignity learned in battlefield hospitals. "I am Clara Whitfield, a registered nurse traveling to serve the mining camps. I have letters of recommendation from St. Mary's Hospital in St. Louis and documentation from the Territorial Health Commission. Would you care to examine them?" The woman faltered slightly but rallied. "Papers can be forged, and no respectable woman would..." "Would what?" Elias's voice cut through like a blade. He dismounted, moving to help Clara down. "Would survive a massacre? Would accept help from the only person who bothered to track her? Would choose living over dying to satisfy your notions of propriety?" "Mr. Hawthorne." Another man stepped forward, banker by his clothes. "Surely you understand how this looks. A woman of questionable virtue could damage our town's reputation." "Questionable virtue?" Elias laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "This woman held her own through a sandstorm that would have killed most men. She's got more virtue in her little finger than this whole town combined." "Elias," Clara said softly, "it's all right." "No, it's not." His gray eyes were storm dark. "She's a nurse, you fools, come to help your miners, your families. And this is how you greet her?" An older man pushed through the crowd. "The sheriff, by his badge." "All right, folks, show's over. Hawthorne, Miss Whitfield." Clara supplied. "Miss Whitfield, I'm Sheriff Coleman. Heard about the stage robbery. You were on it?" "Yes, sir. They left me for dead in Skeleton Pass." Coleman's expression shifted. "Can you identify them?" "The leader had scarred hands. Called one of his men Jake. There were 6 of them. Garrett's bunch. Sure enough." Coleman glared at the crowd. "This woman's a witness to murder and robbery, and you're treating her like a criminal? Get on about your business, all of you." The crowd dispersed reluctantly, but Clara could hear the whispers following them. No better than she should be. Traveling with that tracker. What really happened out there? Mrs. Patterson's boarding house was a 2-story frame building, cleaner than most. The proprietress, a widow with shrewd eyes and work-worn hands, looked Clara over carefully. "You'll be wanting a room, I suppose." "Yes, please, and a bath, if possible. Cost you extra for hot water." Elias stepped forward. "I'll cover it, and meals too." Mrs. Patterson's expression softened marginally. "3rd room on the right, upstairs. Bath will be ready in an hour. You planning to stay too, Mr. Hawthorne?" "No, I'll camp outside town." He looked at Clara. "But I'll be checking in." After he left, Clara endured the bath, blissful despite the landlady's disapproving presence, and changed into a clean dress from her salvaged trunk. The mirror showed a woman she barely recognized, face sun-darkened and thin, a half-healed gash on her temple, eyes that had seen too much. That evening, attempting to eat in the boarding house dining room, she faced a wall of cold silence from the other guests. Conversation stopped when she entered. Women drew their skirts aside when she passed. She ate quickly and retreated to her room, understanding now what Elias had meant about the desert being more honest than people. A tap at her window made her start. Elias perched on the roof outside, concern evident even in the twilight gloom. "Thought so," he said when she opened the window. "They giving you trouble?" "Nothing I haven't handled before," but her voice wavered slightly. "Though usually I at least have the chance to prove myself before being condemned. Come on." He extended a hand. "Something I want to show you." "Elias, if someone sees, let them talk. They will anyway," against her better judgment. Clara climbed out, following him across the rooftops with surprising ease. He led her to the flat roof of the livery stable, where someone had built a small shelter overlooking the town. "Found this years back," he said, settling against a wall. "Good place to think." The view stretched for miles, the town's lights below, vast desert beyond, mountains purple in the distance. Stars emerged like scattered diamonds. Clara sat beside him, careful to maintain proper distance despite the intimacy of their hideaway. "Why do you keep coming back here?" she asked. "If they treat you poorly too?" "Work, mainly, and—" He gestured at the desert. "This is my country, good and bad. Can't let small-minded people drive me off. Is that what I should do? Stay and prove them wrong? That's your choice. But Clara," he turned to face her, "these people, they're scared. Of the wild, of change, of anyone different. You represent all three. A woman alone, choosing danger, bringing new ways. I'm not that brave. I was terrified every moment in that desert. Being brave doesn't mean not feeling fear, means acting despite it." His hand found hers in the darkness. "You're the bravest woman I've known." Clara looked at their joined hands, felt the calluses that spoke of hard work and harder choices. "What if they're right, though, about propriety? We did travel alone together. In the East, that would ruin a woman. This isn't the East. Desert has different rules. But the people will think what they want regardless." His thumb traced circles on her palm, sending unexpected warmth through her. "Question is, do you care more about their opinion or about the work you came to do?" A burst of laughter from the saloon below broke the spell. Clara withdrew her hand, though reluctantly. "I should go back before I missed. Clara!" His voice stopped her. "I'm riding out tomorrow. Garrett's trail is getting cold, but I meant what I said. I'll check on you." "How long will you be gone?" "Week, maybe 2. He paused. "Will you be all right?" She thought about the cold looks, the whispers, the isolation waiting below. Then she thought about the miners who needed care, the families without access to medicine, the purpose that had brought her west. "I'll be fine. I've survived worse than gossip." He escorted her back to her window, waiting until she was safely inside. "Lock this," he said, "and your door. Not everyone in town is harmless." "Elias." She leaned out one last time. "Be careful. Garrett's already proven he'll kill without hesitation." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, that someone cared about his safety. "I always am." But as Clara watched him disappear into the darkness, she wondered if that were true. There was something reckless in his pursuit of the gang, a reg that spoke of personal demons driving professional duty. The next morning, she watched from her window as he rode out, Sage moving with easy grace, supplies packed efficiently. He looked up once, touching his hat brim in farewell. Then he was gone, swallowed by the desert that had brought them together. Clara squared her shoulders and went down to breakfast, meeting the hostile stares with calm determination. Mrs. Patterson served her grudgingly while the other boarders pointedly ignored her presence. "I understand there's a doctor in town," Clara said conversationally. "I'd like to introduce myself, offer my assistance. Doc Morrison don't need help from the likes of you." One woman sniffed. "Perhaps not, but I'll offer anyway." She spent the day making rounds despite the cold reception. The doctor, drunk by noon, told her to peddle her services elsewhere. The general store owner served her, but made clear she wasn't welcome to linger. Even the pastor's wife crossed the street to avoid her, but at the edge of town, where the poorest miners' families lived in shanties, she found different reception. A woman with a sick child, too poor to afford the doctor, welcomed Clara's help gratefully. Word spread quietly among those who couldn't afford judgment along with their poverty. That evening, climbing to her room, Clara found a note slipped under her door. Whores belong in the saloon, not decent establishments. She burned it in her lamp flame, watching the ugly words turn to ash. Tomorrow she would treat more sick children, offer what help she could. She would endure the whispers and wait for Elias to return. The desert had tested her body. Now the town tested her spirit. But Clara Whitfield had not survived Skeleton Pass to be defeated by small-minded prejudice. She would stay, would work, would prove her worth through action rather than words. And perhaps, when Elias returned, she would better understand why the thought of his safety consumed her more than her own reputation. Why his touch lingered in her memory like a promise of something more than mere survival. The heat between them in the desert had been about staying alive. What grew now, in separation and adversity, might be something else entirely. The crack of gunfire split the afternoon air. Clara dropped the bandages she'd been rolling and ran to the window of the miner's shack where she'd been treating injuries. Dust clouds rose from the canyon entrance, riders approaching fast, pursued by others. "It's Hawthorne," someone shouted. "He's found Garrett's bunch." Clara's heart lurched. She grabbed her medical bag and ran toward Main Street, where townspeople scattered for cover. Elias burst into view. Sage stretched in full gallop, 3 riders hot on his trail. His left arm hung awkwardly, dark stains spreading across his shirt. Sheriff Coleman and his deputies emerged from cover, rifles ready. The pursuing outlaws saw them and wheeled away, but not before exchanging fire. One outlaw tumbled from his saddle. The others retreated toward the canyon. Elias reined Sage to a sliding stop, swaying dangerously. Clara reached him as he half fell from the saddle, catching him with strength born of urgency. "Found their hideout," he gasped. "Gray Canyon. Got most of them pinned down, but—" "Hush!" Clara was already examining his shoulder, finding the bullet wound still seeping blood. "Sheriff, I need a clean room and hot water. Now." "Doc Morrison," Coleman began, "is drunk, as usual." Clara's tone brooked no argument. "Unless you want to lose your best tracker, help me get him inside." They carried Elias to the boarding house. Mrs. Patterson protesting until Clara fixed her with a glare that could have melted iron. "This man saved my life. I'll save his. Clear the dining table." For the next hour, Clara worked with focused intensity, extracting the bullet, cleaning the wound, stitching torn flesh. Elias remained conscious through it all, jaw clenched, watching her face rather than her hands. "You've gotten better at this," he said through gritted teeth as she worked. "I've had practice recently. Hold still." She irrigated the wound with carbolic solution, noting with relief that the bullet had missed major vessels. "You're lucky. Inch to the right and—" "I know." His good hand caught hers briefly. "Clara, there's something else. In the hideout, I found evidence from other robberies, including identification papers from your stage." Sheriff Coleman, who'd been watching from the doorway, stepped forward. "What kind of evidence?" "Enough to hang them twice over, but they're dug in good. That canyon's a fortress. They've got ammunition, supplies, hostages from a freight wagon they hit yesterday." "Hostages?" Coleman cursed. "How many?" "2 that I saw. Young couple heading to California." Elias tried to sit up, winced as Clara pushed him back. "They'll kill them if we wait too long. Garrett doesn't leave witnesses, usually. Except me," Clara said quietly. "That was Jake's doing. Hit you harder than intended." Garrett was furious when he found out they'd left someone who could identify them. Elias met her eyes. "They've been hunting for you. Part of why I've been drawing them out." Clara felt cold despite the warm afternoon. "You used yourself as bait?" Seemed logical. Better than letting them find you unprepared. Coleman was already organizing. "I'll gather a posse. We'll hit them at dawn." "Won't work," Elias interrupted. "That canyon has one narrow entrance, walls too steep to climb. They'll pick you off one by one, but there's another way." He sketched a rough map with his good hand, showing a game trail that led to an overlook above the outlaw camp. Small group could get above them, create a distraction while the main force comes through the entrance. "I'll need volunteers for that climb." Coleman said, "It won't be easy. I'm going," Clara announced. The room fell silent. Coleman looked at her as if she'd grown a second head. "Miss Whitfield, that's—" "I'm the only one here besides Elias who can identify Garrett for certain. And when the shooting stops, you'll need medical help for the wounded. On both sides." "Absolutely not," Elias said flatly. "Clara, you don't understand what you're asking." "I understand perfectly." She finished bandaging his shoulder with precise movements. "I've been practicing with the Patterson's old rifle. I can shoot well enough now. And I won't sit here safe while others risk their lives for justice I'm owed." "This isn't about what you're owed," Elias argued. "It's about staying alive. Like I did in Skeleton Pass, like you taught me in the desert." She turned to Coleman. "Sheriff, I can help. Let me." Coleman looked between them, clearly uncomfortable. "If Hawthorne says the trail is difficult, I've been climbing canyon walls for 2 weeks, treating miners' families in camps you'd need ropes to reach. I'm not the same Eastern woman who arrived here." Clara stood, chin raised. "With or without your permission, I'm going—" "Better I go with your protection than follow alone." Mrs. Patterson, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. "Girl's got spine, I'll give her that. And she's right about needing medical help after—" Elias struggled upright despite Clara's protests. "If she goes, I go. You can barely sit up." Clara said, "That shoulder, I can shoot with my right hand, and I know that trail better than anyone." His eyes bored into hers. "If you're determined to do this foolish thing, I won't let you do it alone." Coleman sighed. "Fine, Dawn. Then get some rest, all of you. We'll need it." As the room cleared, Clara found herself alone with Elias. He sat on the table edge, cradling his injured arm, watching her with an unreadable expression. "Why?" he asked finally. "Real reason." Clara busied herself cleaning instruments. "I told you—" "Not that." He caught her wrist, stilling her nervous movements. "Why risk everything for people who've treated you like dirt? Half this town still thinks you're a fallen woman." She met his gaze squarely. "Because it's right. Because those hostages need help. Because—" She hesitated, then forged ahead. "Because you've been carrying this burden alone too long. Garrett took your family in a different way, by showing you how easily such evil can destroy innocence. You've been hunting him as much for them as for any bounty." Elias's hand tightened on her wrist. "You see too much. Occupational hazard of nursing. We learn to read pain. And what do you read in yourself?" Clara considered. "A woman who's tired of running from her past, who found something in the desert worth fighting for." Something or someone? The question hung between them, charged with possibilities. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks, but didn't look away. "Both, perhaps." He drew her closer with gentle pressure. "Clara, if tomorrow goes badly, then we'll face it when it comes." She freed her hand, but only to touch his face, feeling stubble rough against her palm. "You taught me about survival, Elias. Now let me teach you something about living. It requires hope, not just endurance." He leaned into her touch, eyes closing briefly. When they opened, she saw vulnerability he rarely allowed. "I'd forgotten about hope, until I found you in those rocks. Then don't waste it by getting killed tomorrow." She managed a slight smile. "Doctor's orders. Bossy woman," he murmured, but with affection that made her pulse quicken. "Stubborn patient." She stepped back before propriety completely abandoned her. "Rest now. Dawn comes early." As she turned to go, he caught her hand once more. "Clara, whatever happens tomorrow, I'm glad I found you." She squeezed his fingers. So am I. That night, Clara cleaned and loaded the rifle she'd borrowed, checked her medical supplies, and prayed. Not for safety, but for courage. Tomorrow she would face the men who'd left her for dead. But more than that, she would stand beside the man who'd brought her back to life. The desert had tested her body. The town had tested her spirit. Tomorrow would test her heart. But Clara Whitfield had learned the heat of survival came in many forms. And sometimes, the greatest heat came from standing with another against the darkness, united in purpose and growing affection. She thought of Elias, probably sleepless despite his injuries, preparing for a battle that was as much personal as professional. They were quite a pair, the lonely tracker and the displaced nurse, both carrying scars, both finding unexpected healing in each other's presence. Dawn would bring violence and judgment, but it would also bring resolution. And perhaps, if they survived, it would bring a chance for the hope she'd spoken of, hope for justice, for peace, for a future neither had imagined possible. The moon set behind the mountains. Stars faded one by one. And in the darkness before dawn, Clara Whitfield prepared to face her demons, knowing she would not face them alone. Dawn came pale and cold over Gray Canyon, painting the rocks in shades of blood and shadow. Clara crouched behind a boulder on the overlook, rifle heavy in her hands, watching the outlaw camp below. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her hands remained steady. Elias had taught her well. The camp sprawled in a natural bowl of rock, protected on three sides by sheer walls. She counted 5 men moving about, preparing coffee and checking weapons. Near the back, 2 figures sat bound to a wagon wheel, the hostages, a young couple who couldn't have been married long, judging by their tender attempts to comfort each other despite their bonds. There, Elias whispered beside her, pointing with his good arm. The one by the fire, that's Tom Garrett. Clara studied the man who'd ordered her death. Thin, angular. With scarred hands he kept flexing as if they pained him. His face held a cruel intelligence that made her suppress a shudder. This was the man who'd terrorized the territory, who'd killed without remorse. Sheriff Coleman and 3 deputies crouched nearby, waiting for the signal. The main posse waited at the canyon entrance, ready to charge when the distraction began. The plan was simple. Rain fire from above. Draw the outlaws' attention. Allow the ground force to rush in. Remember, Elias murmured, once it starts, stay behind cover. These men won't hesitate to kill a woman. Clara nodded, checking her rifle one last time. The weight of what they were about to do pressed on her. She'd treated violence's aftermath many times but never participated in its creation. Yet seeing those bound hostages, remembering her own terror in Skeleton Pass, she felt resolve harden like iron. Coleman raised his hand. The signal. The first shots shattered the morning stillness, echoing off canyon walls like thunder. Clara fired at a crate near the outlaws, watching it splinter. The camp erupted in chaos, men diving for cover, shouting, returning fire wildly at the rim above. The entrance! Garrett's voice rose above the noise. Watch the entrance! Too late. The main posse thundered into view. A dozen men on horseback, guns blazing, caught between 2 forces. The outlaws scrambled for defensive positions. Clara kept firing, focusing on keeping heads down rather than hitting anyone. But the outlaws were experienced fighters. They regrouped quickly, using overturned wagons and rock formations for cover, their return fire increasingly accurate. A bullet whined past Clara's ear, spraying rock chips. She ducked, heart racing. Beside her, Elias fired steadily despite his injured shoulder, picking his shots carefully. One outlaw fell, clutching his leg. Another threw down his gun, hands raised. Then everything went wrong. Behind us, one of the deputies shouted. 2 outlaws had circled around, climbing a hidden trail. They opened fire on the overlook position. Deputy Morrison spun and fell, blood spreading across his chest. Clara abandoned her rifle, crawling to him with her medical bag as bullets sparked off the rocks around her. Cover her! Elias roared, moving to shield Clara with his body while she worked. The wound was bad, chest shot, bubbling with each breath. Clara packed it as best she could, hands slick with blood, forcing herself to focus on the medicine, not the violence erupting around her. Morrison's eyes found hers, wide with fear. "You'll be fine." She lied smoothly. "The comfort as important as the treatment. Just breathe shallow. Let me work." More shots. Coleman grunted, clutching his arm. The outlaws on the rim pressed closer. Then Elias stood, injured arm hanging useless, right hand steady with his Colt. 2 shots, impossibly fast and accurate. Both climbing outlaws tumbled backward, disappearing over the edge. Below, the main battle raged. The posse had numbers, but the outlaws had position and desperation. Clara caught glimpses between tending Morrison, men falling on both sides, horses screaming, gun smoke thick as fog. "The hostages!" she shouted, pointing. In the chaos, no one was watching the bound couple. They struggled against their ropes, terrified, directly in the line of fire. Without thinking, Clara grabbed a rope from Coleman's pack. "I'm going down." "Clara, no!" Elias reached for her, but she was already over the edge, rappelling down the cliff face she'd have thought impossible to descend weeks ago. Desert living had taught her strength she hadn't known she possessed. Bullets chipped rock near her hands. Her feet. She dropped the last 10 feet, landing hard but rolling as Elias had taught her. The hostages were 20 yards away across open ground. She ran. Time slowed. She heard Elias screaming her name from above. Saw an outlaw turn toward her, rifle raising. Then thunder spoke beside her ear. Elias's shot from the rim. Impossibly accurate at that range. The outlaw spun away. Clara reached the hostages, sawing at their bonds with her medical scissors. The woman sobbed with relief, the man trying to shield them both with his body. "Run for the entrance," Clara ordered as the ropes parted. "Stay low." They fled. Clara turned to follow and found herself face to face with Tom Garrett. He stood 10 feet away, revolver aimed at her head. This close. She could see the madness in his eyes. The scars on his hands were burns. She realized, old and poorly healed. His smile was death itself. "The nurse," he said, voice oddly gentle. "Jake said he'd killed you. Cost him a finger for that lie." He tilted his head, studying her. "You've caused me considerable trouble." "Good," Clara said, surprised by her own steady voice. He laughed. "Spirit, I almost regret this." The hammer clicked back. Almost. Clara stared down the barrel of his gun, time crystallizing into this single moment. She thought of Elias, of the life she'd wanted to build, of all the healing yet undone. Her hand found the small derringer in her pocket, the one Elias had insisted she carry, too slow. She'd never... The shot was thunder, but Clara felt no impact. Instead, Garrett's expression changed to surprise. He looked down at the spreading red across his chest, then back at her. "You," he began, then toppled backward. Behind him stood Elias, smoking Colt in hand, having somehow descended the cliff despite his injury. He swayed on his feet, face gray with pain and effort, but his eyes blazed with protective fury. "Nobody," he said to Garrett's still form, "touches her." The canyon fell silent. The surviving outlaws, seeing their leader fall, threw down their weapons. The battle was over. Clara ran to Elias as he sagged to his knees. His shoulder bled fresh, the wound torn open by his acrobatics. "You magnificent fool," she said, catching him. "You've ruined my work." "Worth it," he mumbled against her hair. "You're safe. Worth everything." Around them, the posse rounded up prisoners, tended wounded, counted costs. Sheriff Coleman, arm in a sling, approached as Clara rebandaged Elias's shoulder. "That was the bravest damn thing I've ever seen," he said to Clara. "And the most foolish. I'm a nurse," she said simply. "People needed help." Coleman shook his head, then surprised her by tipping his hat. "Millerton owes you an apology, Miss Whitfield, and it's thanks." Later, as the procession wound back toward town, prisoners in chains, wounded on travois. Clara found herself riding beside Elias. He sat straighter now, color returning, though she knew he must be in considerable pain. "You saved my life again," she said. "That's becoming a habit." "You saved yourself. That distraction with the hostages gave me time to get down." He looked at her, expression soft. "But Clara, if you ever terrify me like that again, you'll what, leave me in the desert?" "No." His hand found hers. "I'll marry you, just so I have the right to lock you somewhere safe." Clara's breath caught. "That's a terrible proposal. I'm out of practice." But his eyes were serious now. "Clara, Ask me again," she interrupted. "When you're not bleeding and I'm not covered in gun smoke, ask me properly." He studied her face, finding answer enough in her expression. "I will." They rode in companionable silence, hands linked between their horses. Behind them, justice rolled in chains. Ahead, Millerton waited with its gossips and grudges, but also with people who'd seen her courage, who'd benefit from her healing. Tom Garrett was dead. The gang that had terrorized the territory was broken. Clara had faced her demons and found herself stronger than fear. And beside her rode a man who'd crossed every line he'd drawn around his heart to keep her safe. "You were right," Elias said suddenly. "About hope, about living instead of just surviving. I usually am right. You'll learn that eventually." He actually laughed, the sound rich and genuine. Bossy woman, stubborn man. But their hands remained joined, and Clara felt the truth of what had grown between them. Not just the heat of survival now, but the warmth of love, tested in fire and proved true. They'd found each other in the desert's harsh embrace. Two damaged souls who'd learned that together, they could face anything, even a future neither had dared imagine possible. Spring rain swept across the desert, transforming the harsh landscape into a carpet of wildflowers. Purple lupines, golden poppies, and scarlet Indian paintbrush bloomed in defiant celebration of life. Clara stood on the porch of her small clinic, watching the miracle of renewal that came to even the harshest places. 6 months had passed since the Canyon battle. The trials had been swift. Justice moved quickly in frontier towns when evidence was clear. The surviving gang members faced their fate with varying degrees of defiance and remorse. But Clara had surprised everyone by visiting them in jail, treating injuries and offering what comfort she could. A nurse's duty, she said, didn't end with choosing sides. The town's attitude had transformed completely. The woman they'd scorned as fallen became their heroine, the Eastern nurse who'd risked everything to save strangers. Even Mrs. Patterson had apologized in her gruff way, offering Clara permanent residence at reduced rates. But Clara had other plans. "The lumber arrived," Elias said, stepping onto the porch beside her. His shoulder had healed well, though it still ached before storms. "We can start expanding next week." The clinic sat on a rise overlooking the valley, halfway between Millerton and the mining camps. They'd chosen the spot together, accessible to those who needed care, but with the breathing room they both required. The main building was simple but sturdy, with a surgery, recovery room, and living quarters. The expansion would add rooms for patients who needed extended care. Sarah would have loved the flowers, Elias said quietly, watching the rain paint patterns on the blooming desert. Clara took his hand. He spoke of his family more easily now. The memories no longer weapons turned inward. Tell me about her favorite things again. Butterflies. She'd chase them for hours, never catching any but laughing the whole time. Mary would pack these elaborate picnics, and we'd spend Sundays by the stream. His voice held sorrow, but also warmth. The pain transformed into treasured memory. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the rain. These moments of peace still surprised Clara, the absence of the constant alertness that had defined their early days. They'd earned this quiet, this safety, this right to simply be. "Riders coming," Elias noted. Old habit still sharp. "Looks like the Hendersons' wagon." The Henderson family had been among Clara's first patients at the new clinic. Their youngest son had broken his arm falling from a tree. Word had spread quickly through the mining camps and ranches. The nurse from the Canyon battle had set up shop, and she turned no one away for lack of funds. Mrs. Whitfield, Mr. Hawthorne, Mrs. Henderson called as their wagon pulled up. "We've brought payment as promised." Clara accepted the basket of preserves and fresh bread. Many patients paid in goods rather than scarce cash. Mr. Henderson shook Elias's hand firmly, respect evident in his bearing. The tracker who'd saved the territory from Garrett's gang had become something of a legend, though Elias bore the attention uncomfortably. After the Hendersons left, Clara and Elias returned inside where the afternoon's work waited. He helped her prepare medicines while she updated patient records. They moved around each other with practiced ease, the partnership extending beyond personal into professional. "Doc Morrison wants to visit next week," Clara mentioned. "He's been sober 3 months now. Think he'll stay that way?" "He's trying. Says seeing what real medicine can do inspired him." She smiled slightly. "I think he's mostly embarrassed that a woman showed him up. You show most of us up." Elias said, "It's good for us." Evening brought more rain and the arrival of unexpected visitors. Sheriff Coleman appeared at their door, hat in hand, accompanied by a young couple Clara recognized with delight, the hostages from the canyon. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson wanted to thank you personal-like before they continue to California," Coleman explained. "You saved our lives." "Mrs. Thompson said, tears in her eyes. "Both of you. We named our daughter Clara Hope, born last month." Clara felt her own eyes mist as she examined the healthy infant, discussing care for the journey ahead. The Thompsons insisted on leaving a monetary gift despite Clara's protests. "Mr. Thompson pressing the coins into Elias's hand with firm insistence. After they left, Coleman lingered. "There's talk of appointing you official territorial medical officer," he told Clara. "Comes with a stipend, some supplies from back east. Interested?" "Very," Clara said. "Though I'll need to maintain independence in how I practice. Wouldn't expect otherwise." Coleman turned to Elias. "And you? Town could use a permanent sheriff. Pays steady." Elias shook his head. "Appreciate it. But no, I'll keep tracking when needed, but..." He looked at Clara. "I've got other responsibilities now." Coleman grinned knowingly. "When's the wedding?" "Next month." Clara answered, "Nothing elaborate, just friends and whoever wants to witness. The whole territory will want to witness. You two have become quite the story, the tracker and the nurse, Beauty and the Beast tale if ever there was one." "Watch it," Elias growled, but without heat. After Coleman left, they prepared their simple evening meal together. The domesticity of it still caught Clara sometimes, the quiet routines of shared life after so much chaos. Elias had built much of their furniture himself, revealing unexpected skill with wood. The place felt like home in a way nowhere had since before the war. "Any regrets?" Elias asked suddenly as they sat before the fire. "This isn't the life you planned when you left Kansas." Clara considered. "I plan to heal people in mining camps. I'm doing that. The rest..." She smiled at him. "The rest is better than anything I could have planned. Even living with a grouchy tracker who still jumps at shadows? Especially that..." She moved to sit beside him, fitting naturally into his arms. "We both have our shadows, Elias, but they're smaller when we face them together." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "You saved me, you know, not just in the canyon. Before that, when you refused to let me stay buried in the past, we saved each other. That's what partners do." They sat watching the fire as rain drummed on the roof. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, patients to treat, a life to build, a territory still finding its way between wildness and civilization. But tonight, they had peace. The desert had tested them with thirst and heat. The town had tested them with prejudice and violence. They'd emerged not unscarred but unbroken, forged stronger by trials that would have destroyed them separately. "The heat of survival," Clara murmured, remembering those desperate first days. "More than survival now," Elias corrected, tightening his embrace. This is living. Outside, the spring storm washed the world clean. Wildflowers would bloom brighter tomorrow. Fed by rain and time, the desert, harsh mother that she was, knew how to nurture beauty in the most unlikely places. Clara thought of the woman she'd been, desperate, broken, left for dead in a nameless canyon. That woman had found more than survival in this unforgiving land. She'd found purpose, love, and the kind of strength that comes from being tested and not found wanting. The clinic would grow. The territory would slowly be tamed. Children would be born, and elders would pass. And through it all, she would be here, healing, teaching, building something lasting with the man who'd seen her at her worst and chosen to stay. "I love you," she said simply, words she'd once thought she'd never speak again. "And I love you," he replied. The declaration still new enough to bring wonder to his voice. My brave, bossy, beautiful nurse. My stubborn, protective, impossible tracker. The fire crackled. The rain fell. And in their small haven between desert and civilization, two souls who'd found each other against all odds settled into the quiet joy of a love earned through trial, proved through sacrifice, and strong enough to last. The heat of survival had become the warmth of home. And in the wild heart of the frontier, that was its own miracle, as unexpected and perfect as rain in the desert, bringing life where once there was only emptiness. Their story would be told around campfires and in boarding houses, growing with each telling. But the truth was both simpler and more profound than any legend. Two broken people had chosen to heal together, and in that choosing, had found themselves whole. The end. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. Where are you enjoying this tale from? I'd love to hear. Leave a comment below to let me know what corner of the world you're in. If you enjoyed Clara and Elias's journey, please subscribe to the From Wild West channel for more authentic frontier romances. Share your thoughts about their story in the comments. What touched your heart? What surprised you? Your feedback helps create more stories that capture the real spirit of the American West.